Two American legends, one brutal war. Harley-Davidson is under fire. From the president, from riders, and now from Indian motorcycles. What began as a trade dispute has become a full-blown identity crisis. Who still owns the soul of American motorcycling? Because this isn't rivalry, it's rebellion, and the chaos has just begun. What's happening? For over a century, Harley-Davidson wasn't just a motorcycle brand. It was American muscle on wheels, chrome-dipped patriotism roaring down back roads and highways. No matter who sat in the White House, Harley was treated like an untouchable symbol of national pride. That all changed the moment President Donald Trump turned on them. In one blistering wave of tweets, the company went from being lauded as an icon to being labeled un-American. This wasn't just any disagreement between a corporation and the government. It was a public falling out between a populist president and a company that until then perfectly embodied his America First narrative. Trump had once hosted Harley executives at the White House, praising them for their beautiful bikes and their true American spirit. But as soon as Harley announced that it would shift some production overseas, the tone changed overnight. Suddenly, Harley wasn't a national treasure. It was a traitor. Trump's language was scorched earth. A Harley-Davidson should never be built in another country, never, he declared. He accused the company of waving the white flag and warned that this would be the beginning of their downfall. The tweets spread like wildfire, stoking outrage among his supporters. For millions of Americans, the brand they loved was now under political fire. And yet, the outrage wasn't just about the motorcycles, it was about the illusion of made in America. For decades, Harley-Davidson had built its image on American soil, American steel, and American hands. Riders wore that identity like armor. When the company revealed it had been manufacturing abroad since the late 1990s, many felt blindsided. The shock wasn't just economic, it was emotional. What emerged was a deep rupture between brand identity and global business reality. Harley-Davidson became a lightning rod, not because it made bad bikes, but because it exposed a fragile truth. Even America's most patriotic companies are global now. And once that illusion shattered, there was no going back. And the question that followed wasn't whether Harley could build good motorcycles, it was whether it could rebuild trust. And just as things began to heat up, another threat emerged. Not from Washington, but from a forgotten rival making a quiet comeback. Millennials don't ride Harleys. In the United States, Harley-Davidson is no longer just facing trade wars or presidential tweets. It is confronting something far more devastating: cultural irrelevance. The company's core audience, baby boomers and older Generation X riders, is aging out of the market. These are the customers who once filled the roads, purchased limited edition touring bikes, and wore the Harley logo like a badge of honor. But time, like engine oil, has a way of running thin. Younger generations, Millennials and Gen Z, are not picking up the slack. The reasons are complex but consistent. First, there is the issue of perception. Harley-Davidson motorcycles are seen as heavy, expensive, and old-fashioned. Many millennials associate the brand not with rebellion, but with retirement. What once symbolized counterculture and freedom now reminds younger consumers of a bygone era, one their parents participated in but they do not relate to. In short, Harley has become the Cadillac of motorcycles, classic, respectable, but decidedly not cool. Then there's the matter of size and practicality. Most Harleys are large cruisers or touring models designed for long open-road journeys. But today's riders, especially urban ones, prefer lighter, more fuel-efficient bikes that are easier to park, maintain, and modify. They are not looking for thunderous engines and chrome finishes. They want versatility, connectivity, and value. In that department, Harley is struggling to keep up. Market data supports the trend. U.S. motorcycle sales have steadily declined over the past decade, and Harley's numbers have taken an even sharper dip. Dealerships report dwindling foot traffic from first-time buyers. Riders under the age of 40 now make up less than 30% of Harley's customer base, despite being the largest segment of the population. Even the introduction of the Livewire electric bike, designed to appeal to younger riders, failed to gain momentum due to its high price and limited range. Harley has spent years trying to reposition itself, revamping its marketing, offering riding classes, and investing in sleek redesigns, but none of it has made a significant dent. The brand is still perceived as expensive, exclusive, and outdated, and as one generation rides off into the sunset, the next seems unwilling to take the handlebars. Yet while the U.S. market shrinks, Harley has turned its gaze elsewhere, toward a nation where motorcycles are not a hobby, but a way of life. But before we dive into that, we've listed the gear we'd actually buy. Find it all in the description below. Betting on India, losing at home. Faced with stagnant sales at home, Harley-Davidson began looking to India, a country where two-wheelers outnumber four-wheelers by a staggering margin. Unlike the United States, where motorcycles are recreational, in India they are essential. The roads are filled with them. They're used for commuting, deliveries, and everything in between. For Harley, India represented not just a growth opportunity, it represented a lifeline. But entering the Indian market required a total departure from Harley's traditional playbook. Instead of large cruisers and touring models, India demanded compact, fuel-efficient bikes with engines in the 200 to 500 cubic centimeter range. This was a segment long dominated by Royal Enfield, a brand so entrenched in Indian culture that its bikes are considered aspirational, reliable, and patriotic. Competing with Enfield meant Harley had to go small, literally. So the company launched its Street Series and announced plans to develop new mid-displacement models specifically for India. The strategy was clear: scale down the size, scale up the market. But execution proved more difficult. Royal Enfield's pricing, dealer network, and cultural resonance proved nearly impossible to match. Harley's smaller bikes were still priced higher than local competitors, and many Indian consumers viewed them as overpriced imports rather than status symbols. Meanwhile, President Trump fueled confusion with his frequent attacks on Indian tariffs. He claimed that India was flooding the United States with motorcycles while charging Harley a 100% duty on exports. In reality, the number of Indian motorcycles exported to the U.S. was minuscule, and the tariff Harley faced had already been lowered to 50%. Still, Trump's exaggerations ignited outrage among his supporters, casting India as a trade manipulator and Harley as a corporate victim. The irony? Harley's entry into India was the result of an earlier trade deal negotiated during the Bush administration. Known informally as the Mango for Motorcycles Agreement, it allowed Harley to enter the Indian market in exchange for the U.S. easing restrictions on Indian mango imports. The deal symbolized diplomacy and mutual opportunity, but over a decade later it had become a point of geopolitical tension and misrepresentation. While Harley's global ambitions were understandable, the company paid a domestic price. By focusing on foreign expansion, it signaled to many Americans that it was abandoning its roots. The headlines focused on new factories and new markets, while back home dealerships were closing and workers were losing jobs. It was a gamble Harley felt it had to make, but to critics, it looked like desertion. And as Harley struggled to adapt its machines to a different culture, it was also realizing that something even more powerful than politics or pricing might be holding it back. If this clash between Harley, Indian, and Washington has you fired up, hit that like button and subscribe. We dive deep into the real stories behind the industry. No fluff, just facts. When heritage becomes a handicap. Few motorcycle brands in the world have an identity as distinct as Harley-Davidson. The sound of a Harley's engine, the legendary potato-potato rhythm, is so iconic that the company once tried to trademark it. The deep rumble of its 45-degree V-twin engine has become a sonic signature, a rolling anthem of American power. For decades, it was the brand's most visceral advantage. But now that same heritage is starting to hold Harley back. The problem lies in how Harley has marketed its identity. Everything about the brand, its look, its sound, its culture, is rooted in nostalgia. Leather jackets, long handlebars, chrome detailing, and rumbling engines are sold as more than features. They are symbols. Buying a Harley is positioned as buying into a lifestyle, a lineage. That approach worked brilliantly for baby boomers. But for younger generations, it is starting to feel like a costume. As the motorcycle industry evolves, performance, technology, and adaptability have become the new currency. Riders want bikes that can integrate with smartphones, feature advanced traction control, and offer customizable riding modes. Harley's design language, built around the legacy of the 20th century, is struggling to adapt without alienating its base. Every modern innovation risks being seen as a betrayal of tradition. Harley's limited success with the Livewire, its first all-electric motorcycle, highlights this tension. While it offered groundbreaking performance and instant torque, it came at a price that few were willing to pay. More importantly, it didn't look or sound like a Harley. For purists, that was sacrilege. For new riders, it wasn't compelling enough to justify the brand premium. Stuck between two audiences, Harley couldn't fully satisfy either. Even Harley's most powerful marketing assets, its sound, its silhouette, its story, are turning into liabilities. Competing brands are now offering bikes with better performance, lower prices, and more technology. The emotional resonance that once made Harley bulletproof is now acting like an anchor, slowing it down in a fast-moving market. This isn't a case of bad engineering. Harley still makes capable motorcycles, but the weight of its legacy, the very thing that made it legendary, is now a hurdle it struggles to clear. As Harley rethinks its identity, a long-ignored competitor is already sprinting ahead, unburdened by the past and ready to claim the future. The return of Indian wasn't a fluke. For decades, Indian Motorcycles was little more than a footnote in motorcycle history, a relic of a bygone era. But in the hands of Polaris Industries, it was reborn with a vengeance. This wasn't a nostalgic branding exercise. This was a calculated resurrection with long-term vision and strategic firepower. Indian wasn't just revived, it was reimagined. When Polaris acquired the rights to Indian in 2011, they didn't just want a vintage nameplate to slap on a few cruiser frames. They set out to build a serious rival to Harley-Davidson by blending American heritage with forward-thinking design. The results were immediate. Indian bikes carried the design language of old, swooping fenders, bold tanks, classic silhouettes, but under the hood, they were built for a new generation. Lighter frames, modern electronics, and engineering refinements that made Harley's offerings feel dated by comparison. Where Harley was stuck defending its legacy, Indian had the freedom to invent one. That difference became a superpower. Riders who felt alienated by Harley's stagnation and corporate tone found something refreshing in Indian's voice. Its branding emphasized power, independence, and customization, without the weight of nostalgia dragging it down. But the most critical weapon in Indian's arsenal wasn't design or marketing, it was domestic credibility. While Harley began expanding its overseas operations and shutting down U.S. plants, Indian doubled down on its commitment to American manufacturing. Every Indian motorcycle was proudly assembled in Spirit Lake, Iowa. That decision alone earned them massive goodwill. Indian didn't need to say, "Made in America." They lived it, while Harley struggled to justify it. Polaris backed the revival with resources Harley couldn't afford to gamble. With a younger customer in mind, Indian rolled out models that weren't just beautiful, they were competitive. Riders raved about handling, performance, and pricing. Indian didn't try to copy Harley's vibe, it built its own. By the time Indian started showing up at rallies, it was no longer a novelty, it was a contender. And as Harley scrambled to redefine itself amid political chaos, Indian quietly kept growing, winning over the exact audience Harley was losing. The clash was no longer hypothetical. Indian wasn't here to be second best. It was gunning for the crown. And while Harley held on to symbols and history, Indian was busy building a following that wasn't just interested in what the brand used to be, but what it could become. The culture war has begun. If the rivalry between Harley-Davidson and Indian was once a technical or business competition, that line has long since vanished. Today, it's a full-blown cultural battle. The brands no longer just fight for market share, they compete for loyalty, for image, and for the right to claim what it means to be a true American rider. This is no longer about chrome and torque specs. This is tribal. Rider communities are increasingly split down the middle. At local rallies, online forums, and biker meetups across the country, Harley and Indian riders are locking horns in ways the brands could never script. Memes, merch, and commentary flood social media, with each side fiercely defending their chosen machine like it's an extension of their identity. What makes this shift so powerful is that Indian isn't just filling a commercial gap, it's reviving a rebellious spirit that Harley once monopolized. For years, Harley was the brand of freedom, rebellion, and defiance. But after years of corporate decisions, union conflicts, and political entanglements, that image has started to crack. Indian, with its smaller footprint and fresh momentum, stepped into that space with surgical precision. It didn't take long for Indian to become the new underdog hero in the eyes of younger riders and old-school Harley fans who felt left behind. The styling echoed tradition, but the tone was entirely different. Indian wasn't trying to replicate Harley's playbook, it was rewriting it. The result? A growing number of loyalists who proudly post, vlog, and rally under the Indian flag. Dealerships are witnessing the transformation firsthand. Riders walk in asking about Indian models not just out of curiosity, but with conviction. Some are making the switch outright, trading in decades of Harley loyalty for something that feels more authentic. Others are adding Indian bikes to their garage alongside their old hogs, admitting quietly that one just rides better. This isn't just brand migration, it's emotional realignment. Indian has tapped into something primal, the hunger for a brand that listens, evolves, and doesn't just rest on its legacy. And as this cultural battle rages, Harley is no longer the automatic choice. It's now being interrogated, debated, and in some cases, dethroned. But Indian isn't just content being the alternative. As Harley drifts, Indian is stepping fully into the space it left behind. Indian fills the vacuum. Harley left behind. For every inch Harley-Davidson has retreated, whether in innovation, pricing, or trust, Indian has advanced. This is no longer a story of resurgence. It is a full-blown takeover. What once seemed unthinkable, a Harley-less future, is no longer so far-fetched. Indian Motorcycles now offers something Harley can't: consistency, relevance, and value. It's not just about better engineering or competitive pricing, although those matter. It's about vision. Indian knows what it is, and more importantly, who it's for. While Harley flounders between preserving heritage and chasing overseas sales, Indian zeroes in on one thing: building motorcycles that today's riders actually want. Younger bikers no longer see Harley as aspirational. Many see it as a museum piece, respected but no longer desired. The styling hasn't changed much. The performance hasn't wowed anyone. And the pricing? Harley's sticker shock still lingers in a market now flooded with compelling alternatives. Meanwhile, Indian keeps delivering solid value and modern features without the emotional baggage or premium tax. But the contrast isn't just aesthetic, it's structural. While Harley deals with international backlash, falling U.S. sales, and political crossfire, Polaris, the parent company of Indian, is investing, expanding, and listening. They're not trying to market nostalgia. They're creating momentum. And that's what riders are responding to. Indian's recent lineup includes models that bridge generations: lightweight cruisers for beginners, performance-oriented bikes for thrill seekers, and touring bikes that genuinely rival Harley's finest. They aren't chasing Harley, they're leapfrogging them, and each new model release widens the gap further. What's stunning is that Indian doesn't need to dominate to win. They just need to consistently offer what Harley no longer can: authenticity without compromise, performance without pretense, style without stagnation. That strategy is already paying off in ways that Harley cannot match. The writing is not just on the wall, it's in the parking lots, the rally routes, the online threads, and the sales data. Indian is no longer fighting for a seat at the table. It's quietly, confidently pulling Harley's chair out from under it. And as the dust settles from this cultural clash, a new question emerges. Not who won, but whether Harley ever saw the real threat coming. The myth of American manufacturing cracks. The fury didn't stop with overseas plants or tariff headlines. President Donald Trump's anger only intensified with tweets that hit harder and threats that grew louder. "Never ever should a Harley-Davidson be constructed in a foreign nation," he declared in all caps. His message was simple: stay in America or face the consequences. But Harley-Davidson wasn't operating in a vacuum. It was trying to keep its wheels turning in a world that had changed. As Trump's threats of heavy taxation loomed over the company, Harley found itself straddling an impossible divide. On one side was national loyalty, political pressure, and American brand mythology. On the other was the cold reality of tariffs, shrinking U.S. demand, and global competition. Harley wasn't looking to abandon America. It was trying to survive in a world where the economics no longer favored keeping all production domestic. The threat of new taxes on imported Harley bikes made headlines, but those threats also highlighted a deeper flaw in Trump's approach. While the president framed Harley's decisions as betrayal, he overlooked the complex systems of modern manufacturing. Harley's overseas operations weren't targeting the American market. They were strategic outposts meant to serve Europe, India, and Latin America. Building locally for local markets had become essential to keeping prices competitive and brands alive. Still, the public fury was real. Longtime riders, especially those who viewed Harley as a badge of American pride, struggled with the idea of a global Harley. They didn't want a bike assembled in Thailand or Brazil. They wanted Milwaukee chrome and Pennsylvania steel. The emotional disconnect between consumer identity and corporate necessity had never been wider. But underneath all the tweets and backlash was a quieter truth. Harley's problems ran far deeper than foreign plants. While political fights dominated the headlines, the company was battling long-term structural decline, aging customers, fading relevance, and internal cost pressures. Trump may have handed Harley a microphone, but the real crisis had already begun years earlier. As the political theater played out, Harley kept making moves behind the scenes, moves that revealed just how much of its future now depended on markets far from home. Harley's world, America's problem. While Harley-Davidson was catching flack in the United States, something very different was happening overseas. In markets like Asia and Latin America, the brand was finding new life. Harley's decision to focus on smaller, more affordable bikes for international riders was finally gaining traction. The company wasn't just cutting costs, it was building a future. But that success came with a price. As international sales slowly improved, U.S. sales continued to plummet. The company had hoped that tax reforms and Trump-era protectionism would revitalize the domestic market. Instead, American sales dropped by over 10% across multiple quarters. The writing was on the wall. Harley was no longer just an American motorcycle company. It was becoming a global one, whether the White House liked it or not. And in that evolution, both Harley and Trump made critical miscalculations. Trump overestimated the power of political pressure to force a multinational corporation to act against its financial interests. He assumed that brand loyalty and public backlash would force Harley back into the fold. Instead, Harley leaned into the global model, expanding manufacturing capacity abroad and looking for growth in places like India and Brazil. Harley, meanwhile, underestimated the cost of abandoning its emotional foundation. The company believed it could shift production while keeping its symbolic image intact. But in the eyes of many American riders, that duality was impossible. You can't wrap yourself in the flag while closing American plants. You can't sell freedom while streamlining jobs. The contradiction didn't go unnoticed. Media outlets tore into the company. Union leaders accused it of corporate cowardice. And longtime customers began to explore other brands. Some even switched to Indian Motorcycles, a brand that, at least for now, still built most of its bikes in America. The outcome was tragic irony. Harley-Davidson, in trying to future-proof itself, alienated the very people who gave it its past. Its growth abroad was slow, hard-earned, and necessary. But at home, the brand was eroding. The cost of surviving globalization was the loss of domestic trust. And just as Harley tried to find its balance, the story took one final, unexpected twist. No clear winner in this war. Harley-Davidson isn't dead. Indian Motorcycles hasn't conquered the world. And Donald Trump didn't succeed in dragging manufacturing back onto U.S. soil through sheer force of will. As the dust settles, one thing becomes clear. There are no clean victories here, only consequences. Indian's rise has been slow, methodical, and strategic. It didn't need a global stage to grow, it just needed relevance. Polaris, Indian's parent company, invested heavily in modernizing the brand without abandoning its roots. It kept production domestic, appealed to younger riders, and leaned into innovation without rejecting tradition. Indian didn't win the culture war with noise or nationalism. It won by offering something Harley couldn't: progress without contradiction. Meanwhile, Harley-Davidson has become a brand in transition, caught between what it once represented and what it needs to become. It is no longer in control of its story. The company that used to define the American motorcycle narrative is now reacting to others, whether it's Trump's social media tirades or Indian's marketing campaigns. For the first time in decades, Harley is playing defense. And what of the president? Trump's aggressive stance on trade and manufacturing didn't bring back factories. It brought retaliation. His strategy may have rallied voters, but it destabilized companies like Harley, who were left with impossible choices. The tariffs didn't rescue American manufacturing. They forced it to evolve under pressure, and in Harley's case, to move further offshore. So who wins? That depends on what you're measuring. If victory means cultural relevance, Indian is rising fast. If it means financial endurance, Harley still has global muscle. If it means political messaging, Trump remains a master of shifting blame. But if it means restoring a myth that American companies can remain purely American in a global market, then everyone lost. Harley's legacy hasn't ended, but it has changed. The bike still rumbles, the brand still sells, but the illusion of its permanence, its untouchable Americana, has been shattered. What remains now is a question that every brand will soon have to answer. In a globalized world, can loyalty still be national? This isn't just a business battle, it's a cultural fault line. Harley, Indian, and even Washington are now locked in a fight that's about far more than motorcycles. So, what do you think? Is Harley running out of road? Is Indian the new face of rebellion? Or is this war just getting started? Sound off in the comments. We want to hear from the riders, the fans, and the critics. And if you value deep dives like this, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because we're not done yet, and neither is this story.